scene, I want to write a novel, I want to write something, and you picture in your mind, that's what I do, is I picture in my mind some type of action, something happening. And it's exciting to me or I wouldn't keep writing, right? And so that is your beginning scene. Don't go back and say, well, I'm going to set up everything that happened before then, because who's going to read it, right? Say, I'm going to write the beginning as an exciting scene and make it so it draws your readers. And then when I say it sets the novel, we're going to talk about setting. We're going to talk about scene setting specifically. But you have to set a novel. You have to set a chapter. You have to set a scene. And I'm going to talk about that. So what does that mean? Whenever, I really get irritated, I do a lot of reviewing of other authors' writing, okay? Most of it published. So that means that somebody really liked the writing, and that's cool. I'm not going to disparage any of my fellow authors at all. But let me tell you something. Have you ever started reading a novel and you're confused? Don't you hate that? My personal technique is I never, ever, ever want to leave my readers confused. That's what I mean by rules of scene writing I'm going to throw up here. Never leave them confused. And how do you keep them from being confused? You set them in your world. So
Lee Child is perfect at that. You know, I mean, Lee Child.
That's a writer.
Yeah, you know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. No, that's all right. Feel free to ask any questions you want. I'll answer them here. You know, it's probably better because we'll run out of time and they'll blow the whistle and whatever. I'm going to give you an hour, okay? And that's all I can do for YouTube anyway. But in any case, you got to have that strong beginning. But you see this. The strong beginning is a scene. So when I tell you that I write novels in scenes, guess what my first scene is? It's the beginning that sets the novel. It sets the novel in storyline, plot, and theme. I'm going to talk more about this, so you don't have to memorize it right now. We'll get to that point. In any case, you have the rising action. So we start with the beginning, and next is the rising action. These are scenes that build to the climax. Do you see this already? I have a beginning scene, and then I have the rising action, which are scenes that go to the climax. And so you've got to, that means you have to understand what your climax is going to be before you start to write. You have to have an idea. It doesn't have to be fully formed. It just has to be what is going to be the main point of this novel, right? What, like I said, you have a story and a plot and a theme. So you want all those three elements to come together at that climax. Have you ever read a novel where the climax was flat? Mm-hmm. Yeah? You know why? Because the author did not write so that the climax and theme, so that the theme and story and plot came together. It was mishmashed. And so the most exciting part of the story was not the most exciting part of the plot, which was not the most exciting part of the theme. That's the reason. So if you ever wonder, why is my writing, in a scene, if you wonder, well, I'll talk about that. But in a scene, it's important too, but we don't have really an exact climax in a scene. But we'll see how it's kind of like a parallel to a mini novel. Remember, what did I tell you? Scenes are like short stories, right? And all short stories have a beginning, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. So, here's in this build-up, this rising action, you build the tension with foreshadowing and metaphor and allegory and allusions and excitement and your characters. I could list 100 things on what you need to do to build excitement in your rising action. But we have to go on. The climax, that's where all this stuff comes together in your novel, like I said. You've got to logically and thematically bring everything together. As a matter of fact, I just hit the climax in the novel I'm blogging. So people who've been reading it, and I've had a lot of people reading it, which is really cool from the very beginning, but it's reached the climax. And all three elements came together. And I'm telling you, I thought it was a pretty neat climax. But what was really cool was I was describing these things all the way through to my readers about how each piece was foreshadowed, how there was allusions and metaphor, and all these elements that fit so that when you got to the, you got to the climax, aha, and that's what you want in your reader. You want, aha, now I know why did this guy write this way back at the beginning? It was a foreshadowing. Why did they put this in there? That was an allusion to something. And the complexity of your novel is really, that's where you see it, is in how you put it together to get there. Well, this gets really complicated in our minds, doesn't it? But the point is, you don't have to do it all at once. I'll show you how we don't have to do it all at once. We have, after the climax, a wimpy climax, a cripple novel, I already mentioned that. You got to reach the expectation of your readers. Got to. And I'll talk about that about scenes. This climax, the climax must be so important in the focus of the lives of your characters and to your readers that you can't miss how important it is. You can't miss it. That's how important. That's why you start beginning with something exciting. You set your novel. You begin building the scenes to your rising action with an idea where your climax is going to be. Everything's cool. Matter of fact, the biggest reason I haven't started writing the newest novel I've got in my mind is because I have no idea what the climax is going to be or where I'm going to go with it. But I know where I want to start. So I may just start writing. Remember what I said? Mm-hmm. Inspiration comes from writing. So I may just start writing and put the first scene down, or first couple of scenes down, or 3 scenes down. And guess what will start happening? I'll get this idea, I'll start saying, this is how I want this novel to go. See? Maybe I'll have to scrap a whole bunch that I wrote, but that's okay. The point is to write. In any case, the resolution is the following action. It doesn't mean everything's completely resolved. As a matter of fact, in the current novel I'm blogging, I've had the longest following action I've ever had. It'll about 4 or 5 chapters of following action from the climax, but the novel fits it. Basically, you can keep a novel exciting with following action. It's not like everything's just bleh. But the following action is a really critical part of the novel because it is where the novel is being resolved. The problems are being resolved for the characters, either good or bad. And then finally, the denouement is the conclusion of your novel. And denouements are really interesting because I think a denouement, what I call, have you guys ever heard of a kicker? Do you know what a kicker is? At the end of a scene, you have a kicker. I like to have kickers at the end of scenes. I like to have kickers at the end of chapters. And definitely, your denouement is a kicker. A denouement basically wraps up your novel. It doesn't mean everything is resolved. It doesn't mean everybody's happy. It doesn't mean everything's cool. Everybody could die. It could be a tragedy, right? But in your denouement, you basically have something, you have a point at which you resolve and finish the novel. And when you're done, the novel has to be like, I'm done. And your reader has to say, I'm done. Even if you intend that novel to continue, and I really don't like trilogies. I don't mind series novels. When I write series novels, I want the reader to be able to read each novel separately and not have to go back and reread the other novels. I have a series novels, those are the ones on contract. The 2 that are on contract are series novels from Egypt that's in publication. But they're series novels. You can read them, you don't have to read the whole other stuff. I like that. But you see, you want your denouement to focus or point to the next novel, but at the same time you want it to be complete enough that the reader goes, oh, I know he's done. That's the end of the novel. Everything made sense within the context, but maybe everything is not fully resolved. That's what I said. Even in a novel that's a one set novel, a single novel, it doesn't mean everything's resolved. And I'll talk about this. This is an important point. So, the focus, remember, focus. Story, plot, theme. All these others are kind of technical details. Story, thought, theme. So, I write in scenes. Not everybody has to write in scenes, but you know what? I don't think there's anybody who doesn't write in scenes. They just are not telling you, right? Everyone writes in scenes. Remember, a short story author is writing in scenes. If they write a novel, they're usually squishing a bunch of short story scenes together, right? A novelist that has novel-length ideas like me, I write in scenes intentionally. And I've made it kind of it's just the way you do it. All my novels are centered in a scene, on a scene, the beginning scene. The theme question that develops into the overall plot and storyline comes out of that beginning scene. And the initial scene sets that entire novel. So each scene then logically flows. This is what's so neat. Do you see that? Each scene logically flows. So a lot of people say, well, how do I write my novel? How can I continue? I've started, but I don't know where to go. Each scene logically flows on the next one. And if you have the idea of your climax, then you know where they're going. I'm going to show you how to make them work. So I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to actually show you how you can make these scenes logically flow and fit together. So the initial scene sets the thing. Each scene flows logically, and the scenes drive your entire novel. So what's a scene look like? Let's talk a little bit about that. Most of the scenes are conversational interaction bracketed by description and pulled together with transition. And I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm going to give you a little detail on that, but not a whole lot. The point is that how do you write a short story, or how do you write a scene, is like a whole nother, that's like a whole course, right? I mean, you can study that and figure that out, you know. So there are a lot of details in other places to get that. But what I'm going to do is pull it together for you so that you see how all of this kind of interacts. So remember this, most are conversations. As a matter of fact, if you go to my websites, my blog, I talk a lot about these details of how I do it. And I give a lot of examples from my own writing and other writing. So the scenes drive your storyline and your plot. And remember, the scenes are your storyline, right? They're your story. So the storyline is encapsulated in the scenes that together become the plot. I hope that doesn't sound convoluted. The scenes are the story, the scenes become the plot, and that all is bracketed by your theme. But again, that's too hard to think about, right? Let's just start with the beginning scene, and each scene logically flows out of it to a climax. So let's see that. Each of the scenes drives the plots, and the theme is held together by the overall theme question. For example, and here's, I may blog this novel. This is my 20th novel. It's a really fun novel. The theme question of this novel is, what if there were an Anglo-Saxon maiden in the modern world? What would it be? What would it look like if there were an Anglo-Saxon maiden in the modern world? Where would she come from? All this stuff. That's the theme question that I explore in a novel. You say, is that too simple for a theme question? Well, I could probably expand it quite a bit to paragraphs so you'd understand it better. But isn't that a kind of a neat idea? You know, can you imagine this? I mean, I can. I did. I wrote a whole novel about it, and it's a really cool theme question that had a, you know, that started with a really neat beginning. And I use it as some of the examples in my website. Matter of fact, I may even, like I said, I may blog this one, or I may blog a later novel after I finish with this one.
Could she find an Anglo-Saxon male in a modern world?
Now, see, now you're thinking. You see these things? That becomes, you know, of course you want a spark. Look, unless you're writing kids' novels, there's got to be a spark of romance in every novel. Because otherwise, how are we going to have more kids to read the novels we write, right? So I think all adult novels need to have some level of spark of romance, okay, period. So yeah, of course there's got to be some kind of romance, right? Well, yeah. But,
well, I'm sorry, but I couldn't resist.
No, you should. You know, think about these things, because that's the point. See, when I wrote this idea, I just got this idea, and
well, I can't imagine how you ever got that idea. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, I'll segue a little bit. I think I have plenty of time unless my watch is up. But I'll segue a little bit to say this. I've written in my stuff, you know, if you write a novel that has been written already 1,000 times, how much chance do you think you're going to have of getting it published? Zero, I hope. Because we don't want to read stuff that's already been written. We don't want to read the next Star Wars or the next whatever, you know. We want to read something fresh and new. And guess what? There's plenty of fresh and new ideas out there. So you got to kind of be like me. I'm kind of nuts. I think differently than other people generally. And that's what all novelists do, although I won't tell you that you do. But you can say that I do, all right? But the point is that you've got to think of something that is unique, that is different. Because if you do, then that's fresh. That's what publishers are looking for. My publisher is an edgy publisher. They do mostly a lot of inspirational kind of stuff.